C4 is our next presentation, and there will be an introduction by Steve Vandette, the city engineer, and Paul Evans, the zoning and compliance specialist, and police officer Milt Stansberry. So on that, Steve, I will let you discuss Troy Roads Rock 2014 program. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm happy to be here this evening to talk about my favorite subject, and that is roads and road reconstruction, road construction, period. And I'm happy to have a captive audience to speak to. Tonight I'm giving you a brief status report on Troy Roads Rock. It's our $10.5 million partnership with the Road Commission for Oakland County and the state to fix major roads damaged in part by the harsh winter that we had this year, and in part by overweight vehicles on our roads during the spring thaw. Later in this presentation, Officer Stansberry is going to talk about weight restrictions and what overweight trucks can do to our roads. Right now, I'm going to show you a few pictures of the roads that we are currently working on. Long Lake Road is the road that we started on. You see the picture down at the bottom. That road predominantly has damage from ASR. ASR is alkali silica reactivity, which became noticeable in the 1990s. And since then, there have been additives developed that will combat ASR. In the late 90s, when most of Long Lake was built from Rochester to Livernois, the remedy that was used for ASR, and by the way, I'm going to be making a presentation in June, and I'll get into ASR in a little bit more detail, but back in the late 90s, what was used to remedy ASR was slag cement, or I'm sorry, slag aggregate. And that's, slag is a byproduct of the blast furnace operation, production of iron. It's a waste product, and it was used to mitigate the effects of ASR, which leads to that map pattern that you see on the screen, which can either hold up for a while or it can start to pop. And it usually takes about 5 years before ASR starts to appear, and it can stay like that for a long time. This is actually on Long Lake. Or once it starts to pop and potholes start to form, it can accelerate very rapidly. The reaction is well, I won't get into that, I'll do that next week. But today, starting in the 2000s, thereabouts, we use either type 2 cement, which is a low alkali cement, or ground up slag, which is ground to the consistency of cement. And that actually has, that slag has the properties of cement, and it replaces approximately up to 40% of the cement is replaced by the ground slag. And that does an excellent job to mitigate ASR. And in fact, most of Long Lake, as I might have mentioned, it was built in '97. It's 17 years old. It's in 2008, when it was 11 years old, showed very little signs of any ASR or any problems with the road. Now, here we are 6 years later, and it's practically falling apart completely. Compare that to Big Beaver out here between City Hall and Rochester Road, which was done in 2001. So it's only 4 years younger out here, but you would be hard-pressed to find any problem with Big Beaver out here between City Hall and Rochester Road. It's made that much of a difference in concrete. So a couple pictures of Square Lake Crooks area, Livernois Long Lake area, the ravages of ASR and time. And I think the winter that we had, I think, really accelerated the aging process of our roads by at least 2 years. It's quite dramatic from last year to this year. On John R., we also have significant problems with ASR, but we also have a lot of random cracks and deterioration at the joints. So getting into the construction project, we started construction on Long Lake about 4 weeks ago, and that started with sawing the concrete and getting it ready for removal. The sawing took about 2 weeks to complete, and after that, they removed significant segments of Long Lake Road. And as I mentioned, Long Lake, the vast majority of it had ASR, and when we're done, you will see a practically brand new road, except for the center turn lane. Quite a bit of that is being left in place, but the vast majority of Long Lake is being removed and replaced. So we started removal about 2 weeks ago, and then on May the 8th, they started pouring concrete, and they poured every weekday since, including Saturdays, except last week we had about a day and a half of rain, and they did not pour for about a day and a half. So we started on Long Lake just east of Rochester and worked our way west. This is the westbound side. And when we got to Rochester Road, there were some slabs and segments actually of Rochester Road that needed a replacement, and that resulted in Rochester Road going down to one lane in each direction. You can imagine the backups that occurred from that. We worked with the Road Commission for Oakland County to give Rochester Road more green time, and that resulted in about 90 seconds of green time for Rochester Road, and then it started to back up a little bit on Long Lake, but it helped quite a bit. The good news was this only lasted about a week, and that was due in part to the what we call the concrete breaks. It's the testing that's done on concrete where it's molded, the fresh concrete is molded into a cylinder and then brought to the lab, put into a machine, and compressed in that machine until it breaks. And then you measure the force that was needed to do that and calculate the compressive strength, or PSI, pounds per square inch, of that concrete. And so on Rochester Road, after 3 days, we were getting 3,500 to 4,000 pounds per square inch compressive strength, which exceeded the minimum of 2,800 PSI to open the road to traffic. So after only about a week of this of these backups on Rochester Road, we were able to reopen it. Unfortunately, when we do the eastbound side, we're going to be closing it again, and there's going to be more traffic disruption. Contractors made excellent progress. This is about halfway between Rochester and Livernois, and today they finished up pouring all the way west of Livernois to the western terminus, and they're starting, if they didn't start today, they will tomorrow, start pouring on the west side and work, on the south side, and work their way east.
Steve, that's Long Lake there?
Pardon me?
That was Long Lake there?
Yes, Long Lake, yes. This is a map of the overall program. While they are working on Long Lake with pouring concrete and also removing concrete ahead of the pour crew, about 2 weeks ago they started on John R. Doing saw cutting on John R. between Maple and between Maple and Waddles. And we expect that there will be an overlap such that they will still be doing concrete work on Long Lake, and they will be starting some concrete work on John R. at the same time. Now, the criteria that we use for marking it for replacement, it's a criteria that that I've developed, and I discussed the criteria with DPW, who's doing, it's us that's doing the marking, not the Road Commission. They're doing the inspection part. We're marking the slabs for replacement, and we do that by looking at whether it's got ASR, whether it's got severe damage at the joint such that it can't be simply repaired with joint sealer. And our overriding principle is that we want to, when we're done, we want to have these roads in a condition where we don't have to do major repairs to this road for 10 years. And so when we're done, it's going to look like a new road. However, there will be some slabs that have some cold patch in it. Those slabs still have service life left in it. And there may be some slabs that need repair after 10 years, but we won't have the broad replacement need that's going on right now. I'm sorry, going back to the map, the roads that are in green, those are Big Beaver and Crooks Road. Those are, the lead agency for those is the Road Commission for Oakland County. And right now, the plans and specs are being finalized, and they expect to be out for bid in July, and construction could start in August. The schedule for all of this, except for Long Lake, which we know is going to be done by the end of June. However, there may be some little odds and ends that might go a little bit longer, but for all intents and purposes, the majority of it will be done by the end of June. The rest of it, we will go to John R. next, and then after that, it's a little bit fuzzy right now. We don't know exactly which road or when we're going to move to, and so information about that will be announced throughout the summer as we go through the construction, and it'll be put on our website, Troy Roads Rock. Go to troyroadsrock.com, and the website comes up, and it gives you almost a daily update on what lanes are closed and what work is being done at that particular time. At this point, I am going to turn it over to Mr. Paul Evans, who is going to talk about how the city is helping the business community cope with the construction.
Thanks, Steve.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, what the Troy Roads Rock staff did is we identified that almost 1,000 businesses, non-residential entities, offices, would potentially be affected by road lane closures in the project areas. So the reason why we did that identification is the city sign code allows these businesses to have some additional signage while the lanes in front of their businesses are closed. So, and I'm involved because I'm the guy who reviews and issues the sign permits. So what you see on the overhead here is a postcard that we sent to all the known non-residential entities in the project areas. Now the postcard summarizes the project and also explains that anyone who wants to get a sign permit can do so by emailing me and just emailing me their sign permit application. Now the applications are free, and I'll return them back to everybody via email. So I've received some phone calls, and I've issued about 5 permits so far, and we're going to continue that throughout the course of the project. Now, we know that even though we have an extensive database here in Troy, we're not confident we might have hit all businesses. That's just the nature of how it works. So, in addition to the mailings, we asked Bob Schultz of our Department of Public Works to make personal visits to every business owner that we can in the project areas as the project's moving along. So he's got a stack of postcards that he's going to knock on the doors of businesses to make sure that everybody knows what's going on, a little bit about the project, and the fact they can get signed permits if they need them. So that's how we're trying to reach out to help out the affected business community in dealing with road construction. We all know that there's never really a good time to do any road construction, so we're trying to make it as painless as possible. And with that, I'll turn it over to the award-winning Officer Milt Stansbury. And he's going Milt's going to talk a little bit about what the police do to protect our roads.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Hello. I think I know most people
evening.
here. I think except for one. I'm Officer Stansbury. I've been with the City of Troy for over 23 years. Thank you. I've been with a motor carrier. I've been a motor carrier officer for, well, almost 20 years now. So I had some experience with some of these heavyweight trucks we're going to talk about tonight. I was asked to come here specifically to speak about the frost law. And what is the frost law? Frost law is actually a layman's term for what the state refers to as seasonal reduced loading, and that's during the time of the spring thaw. All right, and the spring thaw, how it affects the roads is obviously it's more fragile, as the folks will tell you that in the engineering department. Spoke with Mr. Van Dett and with the county officials, and what we did this year is during that time of March, April, and May is when the state says that we put provisions in there that municipalities and the state themselves and counties can enact this reduced loading on our roads, and it's different for different types of roads. This year they took effect March 19th, and we were in lockstep with the county. Cindy Stewart put it on our city webpage. We also, the reduced loading effect was till the 28th of April, quite some time. I don't ever remember it being this long in all my years here. As a matter of fact, I just checked my email today, and the state notified me that there is still frost law in effect through almost the end of the month in the UP. I've never seen it like this. So the effects of the frost law, we notified by our webpage. We also signed our lowest roads so that industry is aware of it, so they can make provisions to either lighten their loads on those that where their loads are too heavy, or they can either route their vehicles if they're overweight around it. So it's in place so business can be conducted. What the slide he has up here is one of the trucks that I happened to stop this one. I worked with my partner, Officer Linton, during that period of time. We stopped approximately 120 trucks that we suspected that were overweight. They were all overweight, just some more so than others, with no exceptions. This is a particularly heavy one. The weight on this truck would have been overweight anywhere, I think, in North America during any time. Also, the reason you see it at the DPW yard is I noticed that it had some particular safety defects, so I put on my coveralls and blocked the wheels and went underneath it and looked at the brakes. That truck has 11 axles, which is the maximum allowed in the state, so it has 22 brakes. Of the 22 brakes, 10 of them were deemed out of service.
Oh my God.
So there's a safety component to this also. So you've got this big heavy truck, and by the way, our state allows double the weight of any other state I'm aware of. What most states allow 80,000 gross. We allow up to, on that configuration, allow 160,000, and that's if they're in compliance. So they're very well, as this one is, can be overweight. So that was placed out of service. They had to bring in a mechanic to make repairs before it was released, or if they choose to try to tow it, they can do that too, but they're given an option. And they requested if they could donate the overweight sand they had in it. And the DPW agreed that they could donate it to them. And so it made them within legal limits. Next slide. All right, here's some of the other damage. Now, this is on I-75, and you think, well, on I-75, that's not one of our roads that we maintain. Why would we care? Well, we provide service to people on I-75. This is a particular place that I happened to be at one day, and I noticed that there was a big hole in the road, and shortly thereafter, we had calls for people that had damaged rims and tires. And if you look in the photo, the upper left one, the car, in comparison to that hole, you can see that's a very large hole. That could have very easily caused a crash. And I think that might be the front of my vehicle there. I blocked that area. We're not going to leave. I-75 is not one of our roads we maintain, but you're not going to allow someone to hit that. And downstream, like I said, there's more cars that are damaged. And here's some of the debris in the roadway at the bottom slide. And if you compare those with the vehicles in the background, those are approximately the size of a softball or maybe to a volleyball size. Well, a car ahead of the vehicle up in the upper right struck that hole, put one of those pieces airborne, and this poor guy behind him, he missed the hole, but he didn't miss the debris. And it bent that pillar right there next to his window and on into his windshield. Luckily, he didn't have a passenger. That could have been really bad. And it scarred his hood, too. Ed Mike, I don't know if you saw this car later or not. I can't even see it. But anyhow, the driver had glass in his hair and ears and eyes. He was pretty shaken up, and I would have been, too. It was pretty scary. So this has a safety component to it also, our roads. And instead of just the money to repair them so we don't bend our rims. But this could have been very bad had there been a passenger in that vehicle. So that's what the police department's doing about it, is that we, by direction of my superiors, we ramped up our as far as monitoring of our roads. And we have in years past, but we did more so this year. Any questions from anyone?
Thank you. Councilman Pennington.
Milt, I know you ramp up the enforcement during that frost law time, but you've also got guys that are weighing trucks all year round, right?
Myself and Officer Linton are the only two trained to do it, and we do it all year long. And as a matter of fact, it was a few days after the frost law had been lifted, I still got more overweight vehicles on normal roads that were, it was outlandish. It was still overweight. I'm told, well, in my state police counterparts and county, we all talk, and there's also studies that point this out. In urban areas, there is very little enforcement. And some of the industry knows that, because in the urban areas, there's a lot of trucks, a lot of traffic, and very few officers. And my father, I spoke to him today about it, and he will tell you the same thing. He used to be a truck driver, and he concurs with that, you know. And so we did ramp it up because that is the longest frost law period that I've seen. But you take a look at the roads, and it needs to be monitored closely, obviously.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mayor Pro Tem Henderson.
Just, when you see a truck that size, you can guess that it's probably overweight, but how do you actually, you require them to go to a weigh station, pull them over and go?
Great question. Is that we're fortunate. Most places do not have the scales at the DPW that we have, and it's a 10-foot platform, and we can weigh them in groups, which is to their favor because we average out the weight over those axles. Because we're an axle state, we're not actually a gross weight state. Some states are. We actually define what you can weigh on an individual axle, and there's other components that go to it as far as spacing and whatnot, as far as the footprint it's putting on the road and the damage it could cause. And so that platform, we can still single stuff out, but we can weigh them as a group, and it goes to their favor because then you're not picking out the heaviest axle. And it's so we have those scales there. They're certified, and they were down recently on that truck I spoke to you just a moment ago that was after the frost laws, is they were repaving the lot there, and we couldn't get to the scales. So the county graciously came out to a parking lot with their portable ones and weighed it for us. But that is way more time consuming because you have to really lay out all these different panels for each axle so it's all in a level area to weigh it, and it's way more time consuming. It takes minutes to actually weigh one, where it took 20 minutes to weigh it with portable scales. So that's how we do it. We weigh it at our city scales.
Councilman Fleming.
Yeah, Officer Stansberry, very informative. You indicated that Michigan allows gross weight of about 160,000 pounds, but that was more than any other state that you were aware of.
It's
How
more
does
than
that
any state
compare
I'm
to-
aware of. I did some searching, and I can't find, now through special permits, other states allow more, but that's for special moves, usually for one-time moves. But then again, I just checked into that, and the highest one that I could find in recent history was a 500,000-pound move in another state. Well, our state allowed a 1.5 million pound move, and it was at a flat rate of $50. I don't think that really compensates for roads repair. I don't know. I'm not a part of the accounting, but I don't think those add up too well.
I agree. Even with cop math, that's,
Yeah, that's exactly right. Thank you. Cop math has to be simple.
Any other questions for Mr. Vandett or anyone?
Actually, I had one question for Steve on the one slide that had, thanks, Mel,
Thank you.
that had DeQuinder on there.
This map?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just so the public knows, we are not, it kind of shows that we're doing both sides of DeQuinder, but we're just doing the southbound.
We are just doing the southbound side. There is a northbound component. It's north and south of Maple, and that is being paid for by Sterling Heights. And so our contractor is doing the work, but it's being paid for by others.
Okay.
So but technically speaking, we're not spending any of our money in
Right.
anyone else's town.
But it will be done the same time.
It will be done at the
Okay,
same
good.
time. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you for the updates. It helps us because we get a lot of questions. I told Steve today that I think a lot of people would be surprised that Long Lake is 17 years old, because a lot of people think that we just did that road. For some reason, it doesn't seem like it's been 17 years, but it has been.